Hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us with this live panel discussion that we're having today. I'm Tim Gilbert from San Francisco Agency, and we're hosting this at Maria01 in downtown Helsinki. The point of today is to talk about how VCs can maximize their awareness and their visibility in the earned media. So, with the venture capital scene really taking off right now, there's a lot of competition out there for VCs and their portfolio companies to really shine through. So they've really got to communicate their values in order to get the best startups, GPs, LPs through their funnels. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm here with a live panel of esteemed journalists and PR and communication professionals, and we're going to have a chat about some hints and tips that we can go through for getting through to the earned media today. So some of you have sent questions through when you signed up, so thank you very much for those, and that will very much drive our conversation today. So if we kind of dive straight into today's program, the agenda for today is that we are going to have a panel discussion with Elina Lappalainen, Reetta Pesonen, and Reetta Heiskanen. We also have a special keynote from Robin Waters at TechEU. He's sending a pre-recorded video for us to enjoy. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions that pop into your head throughout this webinar, then please do send those through, and we'll try and get through as many as we can at the end. So yeah, as kind of said previously, SF and Maria01 really want to help VCs understand the media scene better, and so that's why we're kind of hosting this event today. So a little bit of information about San Francisco Agency just before we get started. So founded in 2009 by Juhani Polko. So we're one of the agencies in the Nordic countries that help startups and growth companies and VCs get domestic and international recognition. So we've got an in-house team of international PR professionals, and we work in a variety of languages to kind of proactively generate media coverage and value-adding services for our companies. We've worked with over 250 different companies from all across different industries, such as oral health, Futurice, Self-Forte in the most Credit and House space. But we also work with investors like Everly Growth Partners, Nordic Ninja VC, Superhero Capital, and Gorilla Capital. So enough about us. I am your host, once again, Tim Gilbert here. My colleague, Reetta Ilo, was supposed to be hosting today, but unfortunately has come down with some seasonal flu. So get well soon. And if you have any questions for us, after the event, then you can find our email addresses right here. So first name at sanfrancisco.fi. So I'm the kind of senior comms manager at San Francisco Agency, and me and Reetta work together in the startup and investor kind of comms relations team at the company. So yes, diving into our panelists then, we have Elina Lappalainen from Helsingin Sanomat Visio, hello, Reetta Pesonen from Slush, hello, and Reetta Heiskanen. So please introduce yourselves in a couple of words and what you do. So.
Oh, hello, good morning. I'm Elina Lappalainen, and I'm a business journalist in Helsingin Sanomat, new business media brand Huas Visio. And there I cover stuff that I have covered like 11 years previously in elsewhere, meaning startups, technology, in more general startup ecosystem and people and phenomena behind it. I write about funding rounds, new funds, etc. So in general, we are here to give more understanding to our people what brings growth to Finland and new jobs and what kind of future we are going to have with these Finnish startups.
Thank you very much, H.
Yeah, my name is Reetta Heiskanen. I'm the platform and marketing manager at Maki.vc, which is a European seed stage fund based in Helsinki. We invest in deep tech and brand-driven companies So always looking for new relentless founders all around the globe, because we have a global mandate, and our initial ticket sizes, they actually range from like 200,000 to 3 million. So super happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And
yes, good morning. Yes, I am Reetta Pesonen. I work with PR and comms at Slush. Basically, my job is to make sure that we get the media to Slush this year and offer them interesting stories that they can cover. And yeah, we are doing this event, this small little 8,000 people event in December in Helsinki. So very excited for that.
thank you very much. And so let's kind of dive straight into some topics for today. Why should VCs build relationships with journalists? What's the value of doing that and PR for them? Maybe Elina, you could start.
Well, maybe because I need to know I need to give context to my stories. And I like to get some background information. And I like to talk to VCs, what's coming up, what are the interesting trends that they see happening, what's bubbling under, maybe some tips about what companies are going to have, some information, interesting news coming up, so that I can prepare and give context in my stories, plan my stories. I think it gives me a better understanding of what's happening, and then it results to better stories, eventually to my readers, and also helps startups to get through if I already have some idea that their VC thinks that this is interesting, this is related to a bigger phenomenon that's happening, and I can give context to the story. So it helps me in that way, and that's why it helps also the portfolio companies.
Yeah, for sure. So how do they typically go around building that relationship with you?
Well, basically, I know all the VCs in Finland, so it's very casual. So we just send messages that, hey, could we meet, or can you have a phone call, or send messages in WhatsApp or whatever. So I try to meet all of them like a few times, once a year or something, or have phone calls. So that's, but I think I should do more of that. So.
Okay, thank you. And then from within a VC, so why are you building those relationships with journalists, and how has it helped you previously?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in general, the VC scene has matured a lot during the last 10 years. For the general public, the word and the finance world in general might feel a bit distant, and it's still not a word that the general public would know super well. So I think it's really important to kind of tell more about this world, what's going on, why do we actually invest in Precedence founders. I think in general, VCs, they have a lot of information regarding different industries. So for example, a VC might be looking into quantum computing, climate tech, femtech, which relates to women's health and technology. So they would have a lot of information regarding these new industries that could be super interesting for journalists as well. Also, VCs, they work super closely with the portfolio companies. So seeing a portfolio company going through that growth journey, which can take like 10 years, so that also builds the VC's knowledge on topics such as customer success, marketing. How does a founder actually go through those years? What kind of struggles does she go through when building a company? So I think all that information is super relevant also for general public, not only the business world.
So really communicating your values beyond kind of just the money side of things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then Reetta from Slush, so kind of acting as a intermediary between bringing the media and investors and startups together. So what's kind of the process between connecting those two, and why do you kind of invite the media to Slush, and what kinds of things are you looking for?
That's a good question. And something that I would like to add to kind of why I think this is a good question is that it is about building relationships. And I think that applies even if you think about Slush. Like, I would advise everyone to, when they're coming to Slush, like work a bit beforehand and like don't just see Slush as the 2 days in December, just see it as a bigger picture, like as a bigger whole in a way. So kind of, I would advise to start building the relationships even beforehand and like giving good stories and good context to the stories. And media is there to cover the stories, but it's not that they only have the 2 days to kind of write whatever someone asks them to write about. You want to provide them with information and additional information even beforehand. And I think that is something that's like, it's the most successful way to kind of navigate Slush and work with media in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. So, Elina, when it comes to which stories that VCs can tell, so I think it's maybe getting a bit beyond the money. I think the money is just the mechanism for driving the conversation. So what kind of stories are you really looking to hear? I mean, you really kind of serve the readers and what they want to hear, not the companies or the VCs. So what kind of stories are you looking to tell?
Well, that actually connects to what Reetta said about different industry trends, about climate tech or deep tech or quantum computing. It's the technology trends, what innovations Finnish companies are bringing to them. There needs to be something else also besides the money. But I think the role of VC is actually to validate and filter also, because I get hundreds of pitches. And it really helps if a VC can like maybe give some tips that this company is progressing in this way. They are doing a breakthrough in these markets. They are actually the market leaders in this area. There's something happening in this company. They have something very special in this technology is now important to us because it's connected to this trend. Help like realize what's behind it. So I think that VCs can be very important link between their startup portfolio towards me, help introducing those companies and filter and validate. So did I answer your questions? I'm not sure, but I was also trying to react to what Reetta so well said.
No, very well answered. And I've got a follow-up question with how VCs and startups can work together to kind of tell the best story. Quite often, there's the thought of doing a press release sometime after maybe a funding round is closed or something like that. How can VCs and startups work together to kind of generate the best coverage?
It's the building relationship stuff, because the startups might not have so interesting news in the beginning, but it helps if I already know them. So if I've heard about them from VC, if I've seen their press release, it helps them to get through eventually later then.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And so Maki.vc recently raised a new fund. And so what was the kind of process that you went through? And did you leverage media visibility when doing that? And how did the results go? How was the whole thing done?
Yeah, so we launched our new fund mid-September. We got some really good visibility, which we're obviously super happy about. So we got an article at the Helsingin Sanomat and TechCrunch, just to name a few. And we made a really clear strategy on how to actually proceed with the media relations and what we want to tell, basically. So we started doing that, I think, quite early on this year because it was obvious that we would launch the fund at some point. And when it seemed that the fund is going through, then we started contacting different journalists and telling our story and why it feels remarkable to us, because we are quite a new fund. Maki.vc was founded in 2018, so quite a young fund still. And I think we really wanted to tell about Fund 1 too, our successes and the founders that we have invested in during the past 3 to 4 years. So, for example, Spinova is one of our Fund 1 companies, and that's something that we really wanted to highlight, and also telling about the focus for Fund 2. So really focusing on deep tech and brand-driven companies. It feels like we've found our sweet spot from there. So we really nailed that, in my opinion, in actually when pitching the new fund.
So something you mentioned there was kind of building that relationship early and kind of planning all the activities quite early. Elina, how much time do you need in advance to tell the story?
Well, it depends very much, because if my schedule is very rapidly moving, if there's urgent news, I need to react to those. So then maybe some minor or not so urgent news, they just vanish from my calendar. So if we can do the interview even a week earlier, it helps me to then have time to write the story, even if something urgent comes up. So I would like to get some ping or something tips that something's coming up even month before, but at least like 2 weeks would be good notice. So then we can book the interview, check if we need to take our own pictures. Then I have time to write it. We can adjust the embargo or when it's coming out. So that 2 weeks would be like good timing. But then of course it's nice to be able to plan my work schedule and workflow even earlier. So if you have something like it's not so urgent, big news coming up, then maybe pitching the idea as early as possible is a good idea, because there's always like things like, hey, there's Lifeline's puck coming out on certain date, and then I drop everything else and focus on that. So it's tough luck for those smaller news then. So
I think that's part of the cycle, that not everything is able to go through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the industry right now, we're seeing like much more funding available to startups, much bigger rounds being raised. So is there a threshold for which companies really won't get through with smaller like amounts? So is there like a number where there's a cutoff, so anything under?
No. The difficulty is that Hoas Visio is still like a startup itself. We are new, and we are trying to find what's interesting to our target group or our readers. We are trying to find out what are the best narratives and angles, ways to tell the stories, what really engages our readers and gets them to subscribe. That's the main goal. We want to create value that makes people subscribe. So if you can think of the idea, what's so valuable, what's so beneficial to our readers, who are our readers, what they are interested in. So if you can like pitch ideas that help us in that, then you're in better position. But there's no like limit that I wouldn't be writing on rounds that are below something. If there's interesting, if it's like the perfect sweet spot would be that there's interesting serial entrepreneur, breakthrough technology in some hot area, good VCs and other investors, like known names, then if it's 0.something million, it doesn't matter if it's interesting. So, and then there's also if that's busy week for me, or if I have a lot of available time and I need something to write. So it changes the situation completely. I have weeks that I have only have possibility to write if it's like 50 million and urgent news. And then I have weeks where I have more space to look at some stuff that is smaller but might be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very key for people to understand, is that it's a cyclical thing and it can very much depend on the circumstances that's going on in the world right now. Thank you. So Retta from Slash. Slash coming up, hot on everyone's lips. So what are your best tips for VCs and startups to connect with the media? So which media houses are going to be present? And many startups want to announce their news at Slush. So how can they stand out in the crowd?
There's many questions in one question. I'll start with like getting through to media and actually like getting to talk to them and getting to talk to journalists. To my point earlier, what I said about being proactive and really start earlier rather than just like concentrating on Slush day 1 and Slush day 2, I would say be proactive and do your research beforehand. So get to know the journalists that are coming to Slush and like have conversations beforehand and start really like building your pitch and see if there's a story there. And if you can say, okay, we have a story there, then you could narrow down the journalists that are coming. You can, see them from the matchmaking tool that we have at Slush. You can kind of see, okay, this person is coming and she or he, they are writing about this topic and it's something that is kind of in line with what we want to get out there. And then contact that person and start the conversation and ask questions and, open the discussion. That would be my kind of, number one thing, to be proactive and do your research. And about the media coming to Slush, I'm very happy to tell you that we have a great lineup, of course, this year too. We have obviously Finnish media is coming, Helsingin Sanomat is coming, and then like from the international media side, I could name like Sifted, Tech EU, Business Insider, Bloomberg, and etc. So I think there was a third question there too.
I think that's okay. And super exciting to hear that. Media coming to Slush.
Yeah, it is very exciting, and we are very happy because it's obviously something that we cannot take for granted these days. But it's super exciting.
Yeah, can't wait. So Retta H, one question for you very quickly before we get an international perspective from Robin would be that so sometimes there's not always that much news to tell from a VC point of view. Sometimes, the rounds maybe haven't gone through for a little while in the deal flow or something like that. So Maki's done a very good job internationally with kind of thought leadership pieces. So what's been your kind of strategy behind doing that and how's that gone for you? What kind of tips would you give for doing that?
That's a good question as well. I would say that the slower times, they give an opportunity to actually talk with the team and trying to find the essence that is actually there. And it's always there, even if you feel like there's nothing to tell from inside the fund, there definitely is. So for example, planning a workshop day with the entire team where they can tell you about the industry insights and then you can take the word forward and really helping the entire team to find their own thoughts, because that obviously it requires time. It requires you to sit down with the entire team and help them find their own thoughts. So I think that's a super helpful tip to do with the entire team. And I think with the entire portfolio, I think there's always something going on, even if there wouldn't be any fundraisers going through. Just sitting down with the founders and also talking with them on a daily and weekly basis. like what is happening on their company side, there might be some new angles to definitely find there. And also referring to Elina's earlier point about like startups and VCs working together, I think it's really, really important to do that work continuously and talk with the startups, because especially in the pre-seed and seed stage startups, they might not even have any communications or marketing help inside of the team. So not a single employee doing anything related to that. So I feel like there's a lot to work on that side, because for example, on the PR side, they might not know that you have to pitch the story 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. And then they might be contacting journalists the same morning when they want to have the news launched. And then they realize like, this is not going to work. So it's a super frustrating moment to be in. So always being on the kind of startup side as a VC is super important.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So I think we're gonna have a quick word now from Robin at Tech.eu. So he's sent us in a video for us to enjoy. So let's push forward with that one. So he's the editor at Tech.eu, former editor at TechCrunch, and he's got a few words on the international scene in particular.
Hello, hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending, of course, when this is going out, but also wherever you're located. My name is Robin Wouters from Tech.eu. I'm very delighted to have been invited to share with you 10 minutes of my wisdom, quote unquote, about how to approach PR. I'm going to try and make it interesting for you, even though this is a pre-recording. I would rather that we could meet in person, but hopefully, and I'm sure that I meet with many of you soon at Slush in Helsinki. As I said, I'm Robin Wouters from Tech.eu. I've been a European tech journalist and analyst for about 15 years now. So I did gather some experience over the years that I'm very happy to share with you. When I was asked to share some tips and tricks for what European VCs in particular can do to attract quality earned media attention and how they can generate more awareness and credibility for themselves and, of course, their portfolio companies, I was thinking this was going to be quite an easy job, as I've done a lot of these workshops over the years to help founders understand the journalists or the media company's perspective on startup PR. Fortunately, I started preparing for this pre-recorded video in time because I realized there are some differences in how I think startup investors, rather than entrepreneurs, can and perhaps should approach PR. I will start with the similarities. And to do that, I would like to first paint a picture of what the tech media landscape in Europe looks like from my perspective. First thing is you need to understand that there are many, many startups and investors out there, and there aren't a lot of people who write about startups and investors. So that means that there are only a select few people and publications that can have a relatively big impact. But it also means that there's a constant flow of information heading our way from a variety of sources using various channels. So it can be very difficult to break through that noise. If you're in the business of news like we are, that means that things get very overwhelming very quickly and also quite competitive. So there is no secret formula or a silver bullet or a magic spell that I can share with you that can guarantee you will break through that noise. But there are some tips and tricks that I can share with you on how to maximize your chances of getting coverage for your news or your portfolio company's news. One thing I always start with entrepreneurs is to tell them that they should actually not care about publicity and PR all that much in the beginning. Sure, you can begin preparing for outreach and start building the relationships you want to have down the line already. But the most important thing for them to do, especially in the early stage, is to focus on their customers and to build an awesome product or service that will fit the needs of their potential clients. That should always be the priority, especially in the early stage of the business. Similarly, though, for VCs, I think investors also need to focus on their core mission first and foremost, which is making sure that they identify and capitalize the big companies of tomorrow and help them scale. The next tip I give is useful for both founders and investors. That is, do your homework. Make sure that the journalists, the people you're reaching out to, but also the publications that you're reaching out to are the right fit. Research them, read their past stuff, find out how they prefer to be approached and communicated with, etc., etc. The third tip I would like to share is to build and nurture relationships, whether that is offline or online, from the very beginning. In that sense, investors have it a bit easier than startup founders in the sense that they can communicate about multiple things at more frequent occasions, about themselves as a VC and a brand, of course, but there are potential touch points for everything that happens on the journey of their portfolio companies as well. So that means that basically me as a journalist, I tend to hear from VC companies a lot more than actual startups, because they don't necessarily have news to share all the time. You do not need to look out or to overdo it or not to interfere with the PR efforts of the startups and the scale-ups in question. So good coordination between the respective marketing communication teams, whether they're internal or external, is super crucial here. One thing that I think founders do not spend nearly enough time on, and this goes for a lot of investors I meet from across Europe as well, developing the skills needed to tell a consistent, coherent story. Create a narrative about what it is you're trying to communicate and try to make it stick. This is useful for both marketing and brand positioning, obviously, but it also goes a long way in building a story for yourself towards potential hires, co-investors, LPs, members of the media, and whatnot. Basically, the entire ecosystem and all the stakeholders in it. On top of those storytelling techniques, by the way, you can learn those very easily. There are courses available for free. There's resources available online and offline that you can use for free to develop those techniques. So I would urge you to really, really pay attention to that, even if you're an investor or founder. That's very important. Another thing to develop, I think, is the ability to pitch. You want to make sure that when you're pitching journalists, you're concise enough not to waste journalists' time, but also you want to be informative enough for them not to have to dig for the information once they develop an interest for a story. A good way to do that is to keep a centralized repository of things like fact sheets, photos, team bios, things like that on your website that you can link to. You can also build this together with your portfolio companies to maximize this effort. What is important to remember from my perspective is that VCs, for the most part, they do exactly the same thing. I hear a lot about how investors try to position themselves as different, but once you dig in, you'll find out that from a journalist perspective, at least, VCs are like 90% the same in the way that they work, for better or worse. What you want to focus on, of course, is that 10% of added value you create that no one else is doing. But the reality is, the sooner you come to terms with the fact that the VC space is fairly homogeneous, the easier it will be for you to see where you can truly differentiate and how to communicate that. Like for startups, the fact that you exist isn't really news. You have to try and position yourself within a bigger picture and identify where it becomes interesting for journalists and their respective audience enough to take the next step and start working on sharing that story with their audience. Give us an angle, paint us a picture, make us understand your market or sector expertise, act as a source or a soundboard for us, and develop a healthy relationship that we can both benefit from. On top of that, please stay available for more information when you've reached out to journalists, and also try to respect the journalist's time and profession. Not all pitches turn into stories, and that's fine. You can, of course, do a follow-up or maybe try to convince a journalist to do it 3 times, but then it becomes a little bit tedious and annoying for us. So please don't try to push us into a position where we have to say no multiple times. One thing before I sign off, the market right now is pretty crazy, and in terms of funding, both in the number of funding rounds that we see, but also the valuations and so on. It's very, very difficult to get attention. We acknowledge that, but it is worth fighting for in the long term. Whatever you do, do not fall into the trap of embellishing, misrepresenting, or outright lying about a portfolio company trajectory or your own, or the total addressable market or anything like that. Good journalists will notice these things, and it tends to cause broken relationships that are almost impossible to fix when we do. So just like in real life, kids, do not lie. Finally, a personal plea from me: in your communication, really try to make an effort to minimize the use of jargon, buzzwords, and adjectives like leading, revolutionary, innovative, disruptive, game-changing, etc., etc. You all know these words. We've all got work to do here, and the less time we can spend trying to figure out what exactly the hell you or your portfolio companies are doing, the better for all of us. I actually have a little bit of time left. I was actually foreseeing that, so I do have a number of really quick tips and tricks to share before I close. More quick tips to break through that noise. Be authentic and mission-driven. We really like that when you explain and can explain why you're doing what you're doing. We tend to pick up on things like that very easily. Try to convince us with raw numbers that tell a story. We always appreciate that. Do not shy away from controversy and conflict when you have something to back it up. In general, enable us to talk to the girls and guys in charge. That means for your portfolio companies, the founders and CEOs and general partners. but also acknowledge that other people within these organizations, yourself as a VC or the companies that you back, they might also have a story to tell. So try and find the people that are best at communicating that story. We really like exclusive in the news game. So really, if you help us win, that always helps a lot. But again, just to summarize, try to build a narrative, try to build a story, to break through that noise, build relationships, nurture them, try to give us an angle, try to paint a bigger picture and position yourself on it. And then it's hope for the best. That was it for me. I hope that was useful. I'm very easy to reach on Twitter. I'm Robin Waters. My email address is robin@tech.eu. Feel free to follow up after the session with any question you might have, or of course to share stories with me. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.
All right, back to the studio. So I know there's a lot there to absorb maybe quite quickly, but I'm super interested to hear your thoughts, reactions, comments to Robin's video. So maybe Elina or start.
Well, that was very efficient and full packed. I don't know what to react, but Robin had very good tips and very like the basic line. I sign all that.
So maybe like exclusives, for example.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. The worst case is that a startup has an international PR partner in States with the United States VC, and they don't remember there's Finland. Finland doesn't exist, so they let them, the founder themselves, to take care of your home country. And then it means that this unexperienced founder doesn't know my schedule or anything and realizes during the last day, oh, the TechCrunch story is coming out today. I'll reach to Elina at 10 in the evening. I'll send her a Twitter private message, maybe she will write something. And if I get a Twitter message at 10 in the evening, yeah, if you have like breaking news, I have done it. I can make the article in 15 minutes and it's out on live, but that's not helping you to build a good relationship with me, and that's ruining my life.
Well put.
Yes. So that's the worst scenario, where you have a PR agency in States and they forget that there's Finland. So maybe that's something I would like to add to Robin's very good presentation.
Yeah, and then moving down the line, so thoughts and comments.
Yeah, I think he had several good points, but the fact that as a VC, us VCs, we tend to be a bit optimistic always. We have to be in order to actually make those investments. So you just have to have your facts straight, even if you would like to talk more about the total addressable market or say something that you haven't checked. Always check, because we really have to have our facts straight for the journalists, for them to actually do their work, have a good base to do their work from well. And yeah, regarding the startups and them reaching out to journalists, I've also gotten questions regarding like, why wasn't the headline of the press release actually the headline of the final journalistic piece? I think this is super worrying, and I think this is something that we need to discuss more. Earned media refers to free media that is not owned, it is not bought by anyone. It is the journalist's job to do a totally independent journalistic piece, and the founder can't decide what is the headline of the piece. Sounds super simple, but I feel like I still need to sometimes underline this. And
well, most of my job, I feel, that is to educate the founders what are the practices in journalism. Exactly. That we aren't writing nice buzz articles for you. We are serving our audience and doing journalism and educating what is embargo, how does this process work, that you have right to check your quotes and suggest corrections if there are any factual mistakes, but that's it. The rest of the story is my story, and the limits that go there. If the founder is first time during talking to journalists, I know it's a strange world maybe, but I think that's important to realize between PR and journalism. What's the difference?
It's really important and important to highlight.
And it's all about building trust, and it's trust with readers, trust with founders, and it goes both ways. So I think it's super important that we bring up this discussion. I think we probably have another webinar on this in the future about kind of independence of the press and everything like that. So maybe we can organise that. So a few questions that have come in. How to find the right journalists to contact? So especially at Slush, you mentioned earlier that there's the kind of matchmaking tool available, but you know, it's a super big place. There's many people, and you know, what are some great tips that you can give us for finding the right people to contact?
Yeah, what I would do is I would see who covers what. That's like a very basic thing, but actually just follow different, follow the media and see what is this journalist's niche or this journalist's niche, you know, just like kind of be curious in a way. And then also I think, of course, the matchmaking tool is really good for kind of scanning through like who are coming and stuff like that. But then again, if you are lucky enough that you already have some kind of like relationships that you have formed before with the journalists, then just make sure to nurture the relationships. I think that's what Robin actually just said as well. So yeah, basically just be curious and know what you are like what is your story, and then go from there and like build the pitch around your story, and like really think who would be like which audience would like to hear about this, and then go from there. So I think that's it. It sounds very basic, but essentially that's what it is.
It goes a long way.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think so earlier we were speaking about kind of maybe more breaking news that is happening kind of very timely right now, but then also and the practices that go along with that. So kind of nurturing that relationship, building that narrative, and kind of taking a very like long-term process to this. So identifying it early enough to give the journalist enough time to cover the story. But as we mentioned earlier, there are some slow news days. So maybe more opinion pieces are written, or like VCs and founders can kind of look to doing more opinion-based articles. So one question that came in is like, what is thought leadership and how can we kind of exploit it more? So, or maybe that's a poor choice of words, but how can we utilize it more for VCs and kind of startups to get more awareness? So maybe I think Maki's done a great job at this. So maybe you can.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and also I think it refers to the Finnish landscape, media landscape, and where is it headed? Because I feel like in the States, for example, it's really usual for New York Times to publish lots of opinion pieces all the time, lots of professionals writing for the media. I think it's becoming more common in Finland. For example, with HSVCO has column pieces by professionals from all aspects of the society, and especially from the startup ecosystem. So I would love to actually know more about this, like where is it headed? But I think it's definitely something to explore. Trying to write your own column from an interesting topic is a good idea, because then you can actually pitch it to, for example, Helsingin Sanomat or Kauppalehti or Talouselämä. And maybe some international medias as well. One that comes to my mind is Sifted as well, which publishes a lot of opinion pieces. So it's definitely something that VCs should put some emphasis on and try to work on.
And we also like follow those VCs, and we get article ideas from the blog posts. And when we like trying to seek something, tips about what's going on, and so then I follow those and read those, and then maybe some weeks, months later on, I would maybe interview the VC about the phenomenon, because then I already know that you know about that area.
Exactly. That's a really good point. And it proves the point that even if you're not able to get through traditional media, then you might try your own blog or some other channels and publishing platforms to actually get your ideas out.
And I think it kind of boils down to, if you're a thought leader in one area, then when there's a timely piece of news happening, they might be someone that you reach out to, for example, for a timely news piece on that particular topic. So, you know, I guess doing research and providing your opinion, and it leads down the line to more press potentially. Yeah. All right. One more question is, what kind of stories, Elina, have you found to be the most, that gain the most kind of interactions or views? Is there a particular trend right now with some of the things that you've been writing about? And you know, kind of mentioned this earlier. So,
well, during this September, I was very focused on having these two investigative reports about the discrimination and harassment cases in Finnish startup ecosystem. And those really created huge splash in the ecosystem, I think, and also engaged our readers very well. People were very interested to read about those. They were like providing valuable new information. So, but it also took all my effort and all my time. So sorry for all those other companies that didn't get through. But that has been the main topic for me during this beginning of the season. And that's also something that is related to what's the difference between PR and journalism, because we are also serving like a watchdog of the society. We need to do also very critical and investigative journalism. Sometimes startups want just only those nice buzzword hype articles, and they don't realize that we might be writing those. But when it's needed, we are critical and we need to investigate and we need to tell the truth. And that's also part of our it's our responsibility in the society for our readers, and you can't get journalism without also, there are both sides, and that's why you need to build the trust. You need to do the things right, not to be a target to those stories. But also, I'm most of the time I'm talking to CEOs and you know, the management. But then I have been thinking that in these articles, I have been talking to those who are not so often heard, giving voice to those people. And it has been very important for me to talk to those people who are maybe in more vulnerable position in the startup scheme, so that we don't listen only VCs and CEOs, but also other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're coming to the end of our time. So just wanted to say thank you very much to our panelists. Is there a way that people can reach out to you? Is there a preferred way, email or LinkedIn or something like that? Which is best for all of you? Is it?
You can start.
All channels.
channels?
I'm in all channels, yes,
Yeah.
all channels.
Yeah.
Yeah, Twitter works super nicely for me. So Reetta, hey. Instagram DMs as well.
Okay.
Email at times.
I would say LinkedIn is very, very, very good. And also email, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, if you've got any follow-up questions for our panelists, please do get in touch. Also, feel free to contact me for any further questions. Just want to say thank you very much for joining us today. I'm also going to be hanging around Maria01 for the whole day. In the afternoon, I'm going to be meeting with startup founders who are currently raising funding rounds and kind of giving consultations for how they can do the best job with that. So if there's anyone that would like to put some time with me, I still have a few slots left. So just drop me an email, tim@sanfrancisco.fi. Thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you. And yeah, that was it from us. Thank you very much.